Yes, I've flown into all 7 continents, only once into Antarctica, and that was via a special C-130 ski model out of Christchurch, New Zealand in 1973. I was just an opportunistic passenger bumming a ride, not as the navigator. This trip was my only mission into Africa in a C-141, where I was the navigator. I am here to hopefully entertain you with the complexities of accomplishing a non-scheduled emergency mission into the Democratic Republic of the Congo, formerly known as the Congo Free State and later as the Belgian Congo. This is a country that has a very dark past that I must pin on the Belgian colonizers. More specifically, the word evil must be used to describe what one man brought down upon the truly innocent inhabitants of the Congo. That one man was King Leopold II of Belgium, and his ruthless tactics to control the land and its people, that go down as some of the harshest ever. I was aware of these facts as I became confronted by an emergency mission to the Democratic Republic of the Congo, the modern name for this very mysterious region of Africa. It's not every day you go trotting off into an area of the world as dangerous as the DRC, for more lives have been lost in this cursed land since World War II than any other place on Earth. Conservatively estimated to be at least 6 million since 1994, but historical sources indicate 10 million were killed during the ruthless reign of King Leopold II. Leopold II was the second king of the Belgians from 1865 to 1909, and the founder and sole owner of the Congo Free State from 1885 to 1908. Obviously, I did not have this most recent information, but brutal conflicts have been numerous for every decade in the DRC since World War II. 1975, it was common knowledge that the ugly truth of the misery of this region of Africa was not hidden. Prior to 1994, accurate statistics on deaths from the numerous border conflicts with its neighbors and its civil struggle simply do not exist. The reality is that millions of innocent Africans perished under King Leopold II's rule and ownership of 23 years, and millions more have met a similar fate from the end of World War II to present. Even if conditions might have been slightly better from 1945 to 1993, I doubt the death rate was half of what it has been from 1994 to present. Most likely it was much more. That latter rate is roughly 200,000 per year. The most optimistic estimates are 100,000 deaths attributable to the armed conflicts that have persisted since the end of World War II through 1993. Historians know that 5 million conflict deaths occurred in the 50 years from 1945 to 1994 is most likely a very conservative estimate and could easily be double that figure. The true accounting will never be ascertained. Today, the civilized world pays very little attention to the tragic circumstances that have plagued the DRC from its inception. Being knowledgeable of these facts did not make it any easier to build any incentive to want to go there, but that was never the question. It was an ordered mission, and our active reserve crew, pilot, the aircraft commander, co-pilot, flight engineer, navigator, and loadmaster, out of Charleston, South Carolina, obeyed those orders. Therefore, our training kicked in, and we went about the process of planning the safest yet most productive mission details. You don't go into Africa in any half-assed manner unless you're suicidal. In 1975, when we were ordered to help take vital vaccines, medical instruments, and equipment, plus some heavy earth-moving machines into the DRC within a 36-hour window. None of us had ventured this deep into the interior of this mysterious continent. All of us were apprehensive but eager to prove our worth as aviators that can get the job done. If you watched any or all of my previous material on this channel, you should have some idea that my tone is more serious and cautious concerning this mission than almost all others that I had engaged in my 6-year U.S. Air Force career. I do not mean to be crude, but sometimes use of obscenities are the only way to get a point across. You will be punished severely for any fuck-ups on a mission into the DRC. One of our most critical and difficult requirements was to plan for obtaining enough of the correct clean jet fuel to ensure that we did not get stranded. The lack of fuel is one kind of problem that can postpone one's exit. Putting the wrong fuel into one's aircraft can be catastrophic to the point a multi-million-dollar C-141 might have to be completely abandoned, or even worse, bad fuel causes in-flight loss of all 4 engines. Fuel procurement responsibility falls on the aircraft commander assisted by his navigator, so together they can check and double-check their figures in order to assure themselves type and desired quantities are as accurate as possible. If either is wrong, it is often the last fuck-up the aircraft commander and/or the navigator will make because they will be dead as the result of making faulty choices and calculations. I apologize for the use of some crude phrases, but they do get the point across. I am simply trying to set up our crew's state of mind when we were switched from a routine bop around the Mediterranean trash haul mission to a top priority emergency, one that clearly was going to deal with the lives and hopefully not the deaths of many unknowns. Our U.S. Air Force Active Reserve C-141 crew was very experienced, even including myself, only a first lieutenant, but already over 2,650 flight hours, mostly from the insane amount accumulated on active duty in the C-130H model AWADS birds out of Little Rock Air Force Base. I only managed to stay in Arkansas 99 days out of 457 days that I was supposedly stationed in that lovely state. I have called it home for much more than half of my 76 years on our planet. Yes, I was by far the youngest member on this C-141 reserve crew because I had left the active duty Air Force via a special program to reduce the number of navigators. Global positioning satellites were on the U.S. Air Force's horizon that would soon make a majority of navigators like myself totally obsolete. Therefore, the U.S. Air Force had pushed me out of active duty and C-130s, even though I was a highly specialized and uniquely qualified navigator with very special skills, not easily learned or obtained. AWADS, Adverse Weather Aerial Delivery System, qualified was a rare navigator subset limited to former navigators of the 61st Tactical Airlift Command Squadron navigators stationed at Little Rock Air Force Base. It was developed in the early 70s to use Ka-band radar and new computers to drop up 16 one-ton pallets from a C-130H model at around 15,000 feet above the ground. This new capability could avoid SA, 7-man pad anti-aircraft missiles that were being used in Southeast Asia to discourage low-level air dropping of ammo and other supplies to surrounded friendly ground forces. The new H model C-130s cost approximately 4 times as much as previous non-AWADS C-130s. We, the 61st Squadron, were instrumental in testing and proving the AWADS in combat in Southeast Asia in 1972. Because of my service in South Vietnam, Laos, and Cambodia during that year, I was a rare navigation bird with an extraordinary number of flight hours for as few of years as I had in the service, both active and reserve. Even though no record exists of my presence in Cambodia or Laos, I was somehow credited for flying as an AWADS navigator. That made me a rare bird, if you get my drift, no aviation pun intended. In preparing these videos, I have refrained from offering opinions but have strived to offer accurate descriptions of specific missions that I was ordered to accomplish. But I am no longer obligated to basically keep my mouth shut and just do the job. I've already done the job and I have lots of opinions on how the overall military services are administrated, particularly when it comes to the role of Congress and their often constant second-guessing of our military leaders who are more than capable of planning and executing the required missions. Their idiotic dabbling with people's lives and infusing their ridiculous politics almost drove me insane. My recollection of the many missions that I was asked to perform, I feel my desire to now voice these opinions is growing. The politicians and military officers who bend to their whims and political desires were almost always a drag on accomplishing what was necessary to get her done. What started out being an introduction to the actual details of an emergency mission from Rota, Spain to the Democratic Republic of the Congo has blossomed into another video highlighting issues that have been around for centuries. The main issue is that the interference of the civilian leaders of a country in military matters needs to cease. The civilians need to decide if the country needs to get involved or not, then tell the military what they want it to do, and then let the military plan the necessary actions and execute the plan. Thank God, Hitler was an idiot in the latter part of World War II and prevented his generals from kicking our ass, which they were very capable of doing if Hitler had left them alone. Why do you think they tried to assassinate him multiple times? I'll leave it at that. Although Leopold II established Belgium as a colonial power in Africa, he is best known for the widespread atrocities that were carried out under his rule. His harsh policies resulted in as many as 10 million deaths in the Congo Free State during his rule from 1895 to 1909. That computes to an average of 666,667 per year. World War II averaged close to 11 million per year and World War I, slightly more than 3 million per year. Nasty old Leo exploited the Congo and its people primarily to increase the production of rubber. Belgium profited immensely from the Congo's ability to export vast quantities of raw rubber draw from trees that flourished in the humid jungle of Central Africa in the late 19th century and early 20th century. Outside of the two world wars, it is clear that in the 20th century and the first quarter of the 21st century the DRC has been and is the most dangerous place on our planet, all things considered. The Lockheed C-141 Starlifter has a maximum range of 2,935 miles, 4,723 kilometers, without refueling. It can carry 63,000 pounds of cargo almost 4,000 miles without refueling, and with a reduced payload and speed, it can exceed a range of 5,200 miles. The C-141A's ferry range is 6,140 miles, 9,880 kilometers. Flying, feet wet, and avoiding overflying Morocco, Mali, and Benin would have maxed out our C-141 Starlifter to the point where only a declared war would have authorized pushing to the maximum capabilities of the aircraft. Fortunately, the overflight clearances came through and we were off within 24 hours of being notified of our change in mission. Much credit should be given to those responsible for procuring all the required goods and equipment necessary to make this a successful mission. Logistics often make a big difference when it really counts. Ask the Russians about their lack of good logistics at the beginning of the Ukraine special military operation. The aircraft commander, almost always the assigned left-seat pilot, is like the captain of a ship on the world's oceans and seas. He or she is in charge regardless of the rank of anyone else on board. The aircraft commander and the designated navigator regardless of the rank of others determine the fuel requirements for each leg of the mission. We needed clearances for direct overflight to Lagos, Nigeria down and back from the DRC to avoid making the mission much more complex than it should have been. We got them to our relief, thank goodness. Many complexities were thus avoided, making our mission easier to accomplish and much safer. We were loaded, fueled up, and ready for the first leg of this unique mission to the DRC via Lagos, Nigeria for fuel top-off so that we could return to Lagos if no fuel was available for us in Kinshasa, DRC. Besides, the cheapest jet fuel in all Africa was in Nigeria since it was an oil-rich nation and possessed excellent refining capabilities. The actual flying of the required route is most often anticlimactic compared to the difficulties encountered in the tight time frame required in all the planning and preparation. Finally, we were bound for another unique experience as a C-141 flight crew. We all lived a majority of our lives with our families performing our civilian occupations only to escape into the world's atmosphere 2 or 3 times every 3 months to complete the same type missions as our active duty air crews. The schedule was set and we were going to stick to it as closely as possible, hoping no unforeseen circumstances would disrupt our carefully calculated plans. I've never had a mission where the preparation and planning prior to the initial takeoff would become a majority of the first half of my presentation. But that's what made this mission so unique from almost any other one that I have taken in my entire Air Force career. Most of our missions are scheduled and planned days, weeks, and even months in advance. Most are repeats, routine missions, but when confronted with a unique set of emergency requirements, that is when all 5 crew members are put under the gun to do their jobs quickly and efficiently in order to safely complete the required mission. Basically, it's like having to bake an apple pie from scratch, and that includes milling the flour and picking the apples. In this particular case, it was difficult for our loadmaster to gather enough reliable information on the weights of pallets of supplies and how and where to tie down a huge earth-moving piece of equipment. His calculations are critical in allowing the C-141 fly in a stable manner. He clearly had to bake his pie from scratch. There is no doubt in my mind that the Democratic Republic of the Congo is the most complex country that I've ever been in, and that is why I take great care and consideration in documenting the 4 legs that made up the mission. I again point out that even though our crew was quite seasoned, no one had ever flown deep into the continent of Africa. If they'd been to Africa before, it probably had been to Egypt or Nigeria. Those countries are vastly different from the DRC. The table documenting our mission was created on MS Excel, but it was my habit to create a manual equivalent in 1975. I was an accounting major at Indiana University, so I couldn't help myself. I enjoyed laying out the details of each mission that I was navigating in the C-141. Browsing Google Earth and/or Google Maps on a computer running a spreadsheet would have nice, but it was 1975 and all that would have made my job too easy. As a passionate tennis player as well as a coach and instructor, I always looked forward to that wonderful 24-hour day off in the middle of any multi-leg mission. This mission had become 4 flight legs because of fuel requirements necessitating our stop in Lagos, Nigeria for a top-off. With that strategy we could forego the uncertainty of fuel unavailability in the DRC and/or the risk of a contaminated fuel source. Our departure out of Rota for Lagos on Wednesday was a combination of one hell of a lot of planning and all the diplomatic and the logistics in order to gather everything necessary to make it worth traveling well over 14,000 miles to deliver it. On the previous Sunday, each crew member had spent time in the air on commercial transportation to get to Charleston, so we could start our Air Force mission. When the mission changed from a normal Mediterranean trash haul to the emergency supply and equipment delivery category, I inherited a diplomatic briefcase for our State Department in Kinshasa, capital of the DRC. Our first leg involved flying a little over 2,000 miles, which is nothing for the C-141 Starlifter. Even if we didn't need to refuel in Lagos, it would have been prudent to do so. Their jet fuel was by far the cheapest in Africa. Nigeria is a rich country with excellent refining capabilities. By topping off our fuel in Lagos, we were assured of being able to return without much consideration of acquiring fuel in Kinshasa. Our intelligence briefing in Rota spelled it out. The DRC is a place where there are few guarantees and you better be on your A game if you fly into that country. We had 0 issues with our flight into Lagos and our departure within a couple of hours. We were on our way into uncertainty, hoping our mission would accomplish its intended benefit for people who needed our help. It truly bugs me when I see my fellow Americans badmouth the US military and paint us as a bunch of bullies in the world just trying to get our way. My experience has been that we are often angels coming out of the sky to save lives, and I have the memories of many missions where that was the ultimate result. That is why my number 1 reason in starting this channel is to educate people about how much of the humanitarian efforts of the United States military is so overlooked and misrepresented. Ignorance is only corrected by good education, my goal. We landed without incident, we offloaded without incident, I delivered my diplomatic briefcase to the U.S. State Department official as scheduled. Everything appeared to be in order and going according to plan. However, we were still very cautious, trying to anticipate any wrinkles in our mission. The wrinkles never came and we were somewhat amazed how well everything had gone. The next day was Thursday, our 24 hours off day. Freedom with caution, since this city of over 11 million souls could easily bite any careless crew member in his ass if he is not alert for danger. As usual, the enlisted guys sought out the riskier venues. One pilot had a college friend to look up and spend the day and evening with. The co-pilot had his trusted Nikon and multiple lens primed for capturing much of the nature of the DRC. We had all agreed to meet for dinner at 8 p.m. at a well-known, highly recommended local cuisine restaurant. We were all anxious to take in as much of the DRC individually as we could. So, if you haven't guessed where I was headed, you haven't been paying attention or have not seen any of my other videos. Yes, I found an informed taxi driver with a noticeable taxi that looked like a reject from Havana, Cuba. The driver was very knowledgeable of local tennis opportunities. Armed with 2 brand new head professional rackets strung with Bow brand natural gut and a couple of Dunlop 4-ball cans, I was the latest and the greatest, at least I was in my mind. Dressed in my Adidas Stan Smith tennis shoes, white Terraline tennis shorts, and my black Fred Perry polo shirt, my faded Indiana University ball cap seemed strangely out of place. Carl, my taxi driver, advocates that we must proceed to the Grand Hotel. He knows an assistant manager. He assures me that with a small tip, I would be matched up with a wonderful tennis partner. And it was all true. It only took a short time for Malcolm to arrive and meet me at the hotel's clay court. My guess, he was a professional approaching 35 years old, and my guess was quite accurate. I have to admit his last name was clearly Congolese. I don't remember it, and I think I never really nailed it down in my head. To refer to him as Malcolm X would not seem appropriate, so I will call him Malcolm T for tennis. He was a medical doctor who had studied in Great Britain, and returned to the DRC to work in the interior of the country where his skills were sorely needed. I was impressed by what he wanted to accomplish through our one-time connection, for he was not anxious to play sets or an entire match. Oh, I believe he would have loved to have done that, but he wanted more. He knew from the introduction that I was a professional tennis instructor and coach. He wanted me to go through his entire game, and he had a little notebook that he took very detailed accounts of what I told him. We ultimately had a 90-minute hit and a 90-plus-minute tennis lesson with several breaks for tea and fresh fruit. I swear his smile got bigger by the minute. He offered to pay me at the end of our session, and I of course flatly refused, for I had one of the best days of tennis in my life with this wonderful gentleman who truly was in love with the sport of tennis. I'll make my little speech right now. I hate when people refer to tennis as the game of tennis and they refer to golf as the game of golf. Golf and tennis are sports, and I'm speaking in 2024. Tiger Woods and Rafael Nadal will stack up with any athlete in any other sport, so I better not get started on a tangent, for I've made my point. We had attracted the attention of the locals with my newly introduced redhead rackets manufactured with extruded aluminum and the 2 4-ball cans. Malcolm and I used all 8 balls in our workout. He was so delighted that we had accomplished a lot, and it was approaching the noon hour on a Thursday in the very hot and humid DRC. The hectic city of over 11 million in 1975 produced a stark contrast with the elegance of the Grand Hotel and the rat race that dominated the populace. Malcolm arranged a wonderful lunch for us at the hotel. He did not seem to be in a hurry, for he had cleared his entire schedule for our encounter on that wonderful Thursday sometime in the spring of 1975. I was as pleased as my host was, for we had plenty of time to learn more of each other. My father taught me how to ask questions of people without appearing to be too nosy. My father lived by 2 books, one being the Christian Bible, and the other, Dale Carnegie's book, How to Win Friends and Influence People. So when I sat down with Malcolm, I was very comfortable in my desire to know much about this wonderful, generous and dedicated doctor in the DRC. I asked Malcolm if he'd grown up in the city, and he quickly responded, "Oh no. I grew up hundreds of miles from here in the interior of the country." So I asked him if he didn't mind telling me how he had become a doctor. He explained that he was very fortunate that his grandfather and great-uncles had homesteaded land-grant properties, cleared them, and made them highly productive. This earned wealth had given Malcolm opportunities rarely afforded the average Congolese individual. He was aware that he had privilege few would ever know, but that he had a responsibility to do his best to make a society that would benefit the disenfranchised masses. He indicated that tennis had become his addiction, and he often felt guilty allocating his time and resources to the sport. I had to try to rid him of such foolish thoughts. I preached that tennis would keep him in good health and was proven to also be excellent for mental health. I continued to extol the benefits of the sport I had surrendered to in my youth and have never regretted playing it, teaching its fundamentals, coaching every level of the sport, watching it played, and discussing it at the drop of a hat. Out of the blue, Malcolm threw me off track. He abruptly mentioned that his closest uncle was also a doctor, a powerful witch doctor. He was somewhat taken back when my wry smile betrayed my skepticism. He told me that he had gotten that reaction quite often in all the Westerners that he had met in his life. His tone and mannerisms became more animated and serious, but not in an angry or mean way. As a boy, his uncle had told him many stories, and he was about to tell me one of them. He warned me that I should take this account as serious as a heart attack. I was intrigued. I promised I would put my skepticism aside and open my mind to what he was about to tell me. I can hear Malcolm's English accent repeating his uncle's saga of the evil witch doctor and the good witch doctor. Malcolm starts.
Deep in the interior of the DRC were many primitive tribes, often with little contact with the world outside of their limited environment. One of these tribes had been cursed by an evil but powerful witch doctor, causing many hardships for this entire tribe. The evil doctor was extorting the tribe for young women. This despicable human being insisted that he be given the 3 most beautiful teenage women in the tribe, or the severity of his curse would be increased. The tribal leaders met secretly to choose 3 of their strongest men to seek out my uncle, for they had heard he had the power to negate evil at any level and in any form. My uncle received the 3-man contingent, listened to their account of evil-doing, and agreed to help with all his powers. He accompanied the 3 men to their remote village and immediately confronted the evil witch doctor, insisting the curse be dropped, that he leave and never come back. The evil doctor arrogantly rebuffed the warning that my uncle had just given him. This dark spirit threatened to put a curse on my uncle, who simply countered with his most powerful magic, turning the evil witch doctor into a great big red apple, to the amazement of the entire tribe. My uncle warned the tribe that there was one condition to prevent the evil witch doctor from returning. They were provided with a balancing scale and a small weight that was equal to the weight of the apple. The tribe's responsibility was to keep the apple and the weight in perfect balance. If the apple dehydrated and lost mass, the balance scale would become uneven and the evil witch doctor would return, most likely wanting revenge. For months the tribe was very obedient, and did what my uncle had asked them to do. However, they became complacent, and before long the scale became out of balance, and as predicted, the evil doctor came back with his worst curse, making the tribe miserable.
End of story, Malcolm declared to my surprise. Malcolm then turned to me with the biggest smile that he had had all day and asked me if I knew what moral of the story was. I was dumbfounded, and Malcolm says, "The moral is that, only away a day, will keep the doctor an apple." I must apologize, but it was just too tempting not to work that terrible joke into my encounter with that fine young doctor trying to make a positive difference in his native DRC. He was in no way connected with this deceit I inflicted on my viewers. Malcolm did in fact grow up in Kinshasa, came from a prominent family, and his uncle was also a real MD. Both were trying to do wonderful work for their fellow Congolese. I regret I could not stay in contact with that man who had so thoroughly enjoyed a wonderful morning of tennis and some stimulating conversation. You'll have to forgive me for this minor indiscretion just this once. I was able to reconnect with all of the crew that evening. We had a hearty dinner that included a cornucopia of fruits, many of which I've only enjoyed once. They were delicious, as was the rest of the meal. The camaraderie of our U.S. Air Force Reserve C-141 crew made the evening most pleasant. We had risen to the challenge of the emergency mission to deliver needed supplies, medical equipment, and even a massive earth-moving machine to a troubled land that has faced many dark days. I pray greed will not continue to wreak misery on the innocents in the Democratic Republic of the Congo. The real evil witch doctor was Leopold II of Belgium, may his soul continue to rot in hell. The next morning the aircraft commander, the co-pilot, the flight engineer, the loadmaster, and I all checked and double-checked our necessary computations and calculations. We agreed unanimously we could crank the engines and leave the DRC behind us. We sincerely hoped the DRC would see better days, that it would become prosperous and more peaceful. Unfortunately, that has not happened. Conditions are still difficult for the vast majority of over 116 million Congolese. We've sent billions to the Ukraine. I believe it's the right thing to do, but it is painful knowing how many innocent lives have been lost in the DRC, and the Western world has its eyes closed to the misery that continues to curse that country for decade after decade. The experts indicate the natural resources in the DRC are worth an estimated $24 trillion. That wealth has attracted the attention of some of the greediest countries, corporations, and oligarchs in our world. The Communist Chinese are not ignoring the DRC, but I fear the United States is. Our wonderful C-141 Starlifter had no problems returning to Lagos to refuel and then complete the final leg of this successful emergency mission. We found ourselves satisfied with our performance but concerned about the 116 million people in that country, 3.5 times the size of France. The brutal reality is it is a country where more people have died from conflict alone than any other place in the world since World War II. The verified figure is 6 million since 1994, 10 million during the reign of Leopold II, and for decades between, the only words that can be used is untold millions. There's no accounting of the conflict from 1909 through 1945. Only the shadow knows the true accounting, and he's not telling. Sleep well in the good old USA, knowing there are people trying to do good in the world.